Cyber Innovations in the Private Sector highlights case studies and the latest industry trends from private vendors. Explore innovative solutions, success stories, and exclusive insights from industry leaders. Stay ahead with the cutting-edge developments driving the industry forward.
Today on CyberSecTV, we speak with Ayşe Altınsoy, a growth marketing manager in cybersecurity, about building trust through authentic, customer-centric marketing.
I'm working in cybersecurity as a growth marketing manager. My name is Ayşe Altınsoy, and today I will be interviewing about the marketing in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity marketing differs from the other industries towards the direction of there is no room for overpromising in cybersecurity marketing. Every claim must align what your product team can actually deliver in a real POC. This is not a category where you can actually stretch the positioning and hope to catch up later. Marketing in this space is about translating highly complex capabilities into truthful, variable messaging that you can verify. Because building trust in cybersecurity marketing is that one very major goal that every marketer should reach to. Therefore, no overpromising or no deterioration from the truth. This is one of the critical areas of how you build trust between customer profiles and the product that you're selling. This is a baseline of what differentiates cybersecurity marketing. The separation between the marketing that is only generating lead versus the marketing that is actually focused on the revenue is the depth of understanding. Again, like building trust is very important in cybersecurity marketing. And one of the ways in which that one can actually achieve that is understanding the customer very well. So being customer centric. And I do believe that's also a baseline for creating actual revenue versus just creating leads. If you understand your audience inside out, then that means it's like you start to generate actual value. So it shouldn't be going from the vendor towards the external audience, but it should be the other way around. So it should be from the external audience to the vendor, so outside in perspective. Understand the customer and then implement it in the marketing strategy. For me, that's one of the important cornerstones of how you can receive actual value from the messaging, from the strategy, from the martech strategy, and so on and so forth. And to be honest, revenue generating teams go beyond assumptions. They immerse themselves in the audience, and that's exactly what I mean. Like, for instance, if as the marketers you are attending the conference, not just as sponsor them, but really understand the content. If you sit on the sales calls, if you build partner relationships, if you observe buying behavior in real environments, so to speak, like being a bit more entrepreneurial than just sitting on a computer and trying to craft some messaging, then you actually start to create actual value. So artificial intelligence and the language models or predictive technologies are nothing new. They have been here for a really long time. It's just the availability of the artificial intelligence technologies to every type of commercial teams, or basically to the humanity. It's right now we have a face value of AI, right? We can chat with them. So this is the main components of today's a new hype of AI, that everyone wants to be AI native. Every company is trying to implement an AI native strategy on their multiple operations, not only on the commercial teams, but every single department in an organization. So specifically on the marketing side, it's highly effective for the execution of for instance, outreach automation, intent analysis, data enrichment, content structuring, or simply process acceleration. But to me personally, there's a critical boundary. There's a guardrail of it. No one should let AI to decide on behalf of themselves, because at the end of the day, if the decision might come from the AI or any kind of language tool, it is not going to be the AI or the language model will be responsible of the result of that decision. This is still will be the human user, right? Therefore, I think AI should be focused on the task, but the decision should be made by the human. So in cybersecurity concept, for instance, let's take cybersecurity analysts, right? So if the cybersecurity analyst let AI to close an alert for the sake of reducing the alert fatigueness, it might actually end up in kind of not catching an attack path, because that alert might be important. Therefore, like, you can apply that kind of approach in marketing as well. If you let AI to decide your entire content strategy, well, it might be actually losing some kind of insight that you have as a human in the loop. Let AI to be task focused, like do data enrichment, process optimization, but as the human user, that decision should be laying with that group. People don't buy cybersecurity tools because per se it's like easy to achieve, or it's kind of like the price of it is easy to achieve and so on. The customer, the buyer of the cybersecurity tool chain, is basically someone who's looking for something that has no vulnerability, no access by outside, no reach, right? So like, it's basically this entire trust concept. And therefore it is very important to be, in a way, like focus on the product-led growth. However, set aside that, like, it's sometimes hard for the marketer or for the growth teams in cybersecurity vendor companies to be product-led, to focus on the product-led growth, because to build the trust, sometimes like you have to focus on the fact that like the tool is not on, like you cannot really reach to the data of the customer. You should not, at the end of the day, because this is a cybersecurity, like you cannot view like how the customer is actually leveraging the tool. That might actually cause the breaking of the trust. And on the other hand, to be like very product, to be very PLG, to be very focused on growing through the product, with the product, is that you have to understand how the customer is leveraging the tool, how customer is using it. Therefore, like there's a little bit of nuances between like a security vendor build more trust for its customer that will be translated into functionalities in the tool versus like how this will be actually achieved, right? So to my idea, there are certain tactics, obviously, but the most important is the continuous engagement with the customer. Again, like this customer centricity. To my idea, a very useful technique for that is like building user groups, right? So because in cybersecurity specifically, as said, sometimes like the tools, the nature of the tools are not even letting you to understand like what kind of usage schemes that the customer has, because your product is on-prem. It's not even a cloud, so it's not managed. So it's basically like you have no idea once you basically integrate it into the network of the customer, like how the product is being leveraged. And honestly, like even if it's on the cloud, you shouldn't be like viewing what customer is actually like leveraging the product through, or like what kind of threat hunting paths that the customer is kind of setting up in the tool. What I experienced, the user groups are actually like working very well, especially in that kind of product schemes where where the customer data is not visible to you and should not be visible to you. That communitarian approach can actually enable customer to talk through with the product team, and product team to understand in kind of like what direction to grow the product, and therefore the marketing teams can also focus on that kind of go-to-market strategy from the output of that communitarian approaches. In cybersecurity, it is very important to not overwhelm the audience while somewhat translating the risk. However, what I do believe, risk is inherent in cybersecurity, right? So it doesn't need to be amplified, it doesn't need to be dramatized, it already exists. And your buyer, like your customer, also knows it. You don't have to be like announcing every day and each day what the risk is and how this is going to be a problem on that specific industry lineage and so on. Like everyone actually is quite aware of what the risks are, especially in today's geopolitical environment. To my understanding, the role of the cybersecurity vendor is not to dramatize that, but to provide clarity and reassurance. So there's already quite a lot of tools and the media outlets who are talking about the risk, versus the cybersecurity vendor's role in here is not to talk about it, is not to like re-announce what is already there in the media. However, it is to like again build the trust for the customer, or give a safe space for the customer, right? So because basically dramatizing more about the risk or like kind of re-announcing the risk is like simply making the customers more alerted. And therefore it is also like one of the reasons of the fatigue, quote unquote. However, I do believe like what the cybersecurity vendor should be providing in here, a kind of a source of stability and become a trusted partner, right? So a provider of the control and ability of navigating this risk. This should be the values of the cybersecurity vendors that are communicated, not the risk. The secure by design narrative is not a marketing narrative in its essence. It's increasingly a regulatory and structural expectation, particularly driven by the European frameworks. As its core, it means it's like security is embedded as a foundation, not layered on later. That's what it's meant by the secure by design. And this is not only for the vendors, but also for every organization to simply like reduce the risk. The secure by design is like simply, I would say, a methodology of what those European frameworks is kind of like providing to the organizations. I believe buyers do value this approach, but maybe often indirectly. They may not ask for secure by design explicitly, but they expect like fewer vulnerabilities, stronger functionalities, and obviously reduce operational burden, right? In that sense, it's less about the positioning, but more about the readiness. It is more like a roadmap that is designed by the European frameworks. Working as a freelance GTM consultant, actually working as a consultant, working as a freelancer as like the high level subject brought me a lot of entrepreneurial skills. Because when you are an outsider to the organization and you're there just for a project or for a limited amount of time, and this has been said since the beginning, you're always focused on what you can solve in the given amount of time with the given amount of capabilities and capacity. You don't necessarily have time always to build some kind of relationship with the colleagues. Versus like when you're working in-house as an employer, it's always more of like comfort zone that you can build. Versus when you're a consultant, it's not necessarily the case in here. You always have to kind of focus on finding the solution in the given time with the given capacities as that. So it's more like an entrepreneurial approach. It's always like bringing your own product into the play. So another thing is like diagnosing the problem, right? So like it also brought me like a capability of like the diagnosing the most important problem as the beginning. So like prioritization is very important. Also like in cybersecurity, for instance, the alert triaging, right? So it's all about like what you give the most importance as the first place and what you focus with your primary capacity. So this is kind of a skill that I learned as a consultant. Alignment between the sales and marketing teams should not be a problem if it is a one big full revenue organization. So I do believe if there is still the organization exists that there is not an alignment between sales and marketing, I think those organizations are failing big time in their numbers, because marketing and sales are like the right and left hand of a body. So they should always be like meeting in the same goal. They should always be handshaking. And I do believe, like from my perspective as an organizational schema, as an organizational identity, you can make this possible by setting up the same initiatives for that one big revenue organization, same KPIs, a shared responsibility on the revenue generation, simply. And this is a point that you are starting as like a structure, as a strategy of the organization to bring actual value, rather than just like scattered teams of like marketing in one side and the sales in the other. I mean, all of us know that a sale is not happening without a sale person involved in it. It's a sale. But on the other hand, like marketing has a huge share of like spreading the message out and making sure that there is enough of attention to that product the sales will be actually selling. But it is at the end of the day, as like the two hands of the body, it's basically a shared process. Therefore, I do believe that the goals also should be the same, and the direction, the path that those both functions are working through should also be the same, because the target is same, because the KPIs are the same.